Chapter 507. More than 100 people from High Heaven Pavilion, under the leadership of Yang Kai, were quickly rushing towards War City. When they arrived here, it had only taken Yang Kai and Ingjiu less than 2 days, including the time it took to find them. But now, Yang Kai estimated that it would take at least 4 or 5 days to return. After all, the strength of these brothers and sisters was somewhat mixed. Although many of them had broken through to the Yuan-Qi boundary, there were still many separation and reunion boundary and Qi transformation boundary cultivators. Yang Kai wasn't in a hurry though, simply chatting and laughing with Su Yan as he led the way, enjoying this moment of leisure. After not seeing Su Yan for more than a year, the physical and mental bond between the two had not faded and had instead become even stronger. Walking side by side with her, Yang Kai could even feel that the Yuan Qi in their bodies was fusing in a very strange way. From time to time, it was as if a single thought from the other could be faintly understood by the other. This feeling was quite wonderful. Heart and body as one, heart and heart as one, it was likely they were not far from each other. At this moment, nearly 2,000 kilometers away from War City, a large number of people were lurking in the thick grass, quietly waiting. At the head of this group was Qiu Zirua of the central capital's Qiu family, Qiu Yimeng's half-brother. Qiu Zirua was originally an ally of the Yang family's 6th young lord, Yang Shun, but on that night, Yang Kai had attacked Yang Shun's house and taken away his flag, forcing him to withdraw. Yang Shun's forces had been transferred to the 7th young lord, Yang Ying, and Qiu Zirua had followed Yang Ying. A few days later, Yang Ying took the initiative to forfeit and gathered his cultivators in Yang Zhao's house. Qiu Zirua had now changed his allegiance 3 times, causing him to feel extremely depressed. Although this kind of change was inevitable, it was still a loss of face for him. At the very least, his vision was very problematic. Whichever Yang family young lord he followed, that Yang family young lord would be eliminated. Before the start of the inheritance war, he, Qiu Yimeng, and the Qiu family patriarch, Qiu Shoucheng, had discussed the direction of the inheritance war. Qiu Yimeng was very optimistic about Yang Kai, so she didn't hesitate to temporarily leave the family and bring a group of Autumn Rain Hall members to join him. Facts proved that Qiu Yimeng had chosen a good ally. As for Yang Xin, who Qiu Zirua and Qiu Shoucheng both thought highly of, he was unable to last until the end. Qiu Zirua also held his breath and vowed to assist Yang Zhao in winning the inheritance war in order to consolidate his position as the family's successor. In addition to Qiu Zirua, the Kong family's Kong Zhan was also here. These two were the young lords of the central capital's 8 great families, as well as the future patriarchs of the 8 great families. If they wanted to deal with Yang Kai, without the help of the 8 great families, it would be impossible to control the situation, so these two had been sent out by Yang Zhao. As for Yang Zhao himself, he had to remain in War City. If he left, he would likely follow in Yang Shen's footsteps. Beside them were the Xiang clan's Xiang Chu and the Nan clan's Nansheng. These two families had countless grievances with Yang Kai, so when they learned that they were going to send troops to deal with Yang Kai, they naturally took the initiative to volunteer, so that they could wash away their previous humiliation. Yang Zhao readily agreed. Apart from that, there were 3 or 4 other forces that weren't weak, and they were all gathered here. Brother Kong, is the information 2nd young lord obtained accurate? That Yang Kai wouldn't act so recklessly, right? After waiting for more than a day without any news, Qiu Zirua couldn't help feeling a little impatient. Kong Zhan heard this and chuckled, "Brother Qiu, please wait patiently. Since 2nd young lord said so, there should be no problem." Qiu Zirua couldn't help glancing over at Kong Zhan suspiciously. Brother Kong seems to hold 2nd young lord in high regard. Kong Zhan smiled lightly. "I'm not afraid Brother Qiu will laugh at me. In fact, at the beginning of the inheritance war, I wanted to ally with 2nd young lord. Because I felt that with 2nd young lord's methods, he would be able to achieve great things." "Then why did you choose 7th young lord?" Qiu Zirua raised his brow, not quite understanding. Kong Zhan was originally an ally of Yang Ying's 7th young lord, but after Yang Ying abstained, he switched allegiance to Yang Zhao. "I had no choice." Kong Zhan smiled bitterly and shook his head. 2nd young lord chose Yi Xen Ro of the Yi family, so I could only choose someone else. Qiu Ziru's eyes flashed a trace of understanding and ambiguity as he nodded. Beautiful women always have some advantages. All men like beautiful women, especially Yi Xinruo's delicate appearance. Kang Zhan licked his lips. Qiu Zirua also grinned meaningfully. As young lords and young ladies of the central capital's 8 great families, the two of them were quite familiar with Yi Xinruo's character and background. Naturally, they knew that this woman's relationship with Yang Zhao was not ordinary. It was also because of this that Yi Xinruo was now very important to Yang Zhao. Although Qiu Zirua and Kang Zhan were both Yang Zhao's allies, their status was not as high as Yi Xinruo's. However, they didn't care much about this. Obviously their status wasn't low either. This news is said to have been obtained by that woman herself when she went to the central capital to inquire about it. Kang Zhan smiled wretchedly. With the Yi family's first young lady personally taking action, how could a trivial vice sect leader of an underground force not be able to handle him? I'm afraid that with just a little bit of sweetness, she'll fall head over heels for him. That's true. Qiu Zirua nodded, thinking that if Yi Xinruo used a beauty trap on him, would he be able to keep this a secret? Especially when his life was on the line. Even if Yang Kai is smart, I'm afraid he never imagined that with just a few clues, the second young lord would be able to infer that he had left War City. Kang Zhan smiled softly. He thinks his plan is watertight, but in fact, there are still some flaws. No one is perfect. Qiu Zirua shook his head slightly. Yang Kai is about the same age as us. If he had been too perfect, how could we still live? Kang Zhan nodded. Having said that, it was still undeniable that Yang Kai's methods were extraordinary. If it weren't for the second young lord's meticulous attention to detail, it was likely he wouldn't have been able to grasp this rare opportunity. Young Master Xiang, young Master Nan, in Jiu by Yang Kai's side, I'll have to rely on the masters from your 2 families to contain him. Kang Zhan suddenly turned to Xiang Chu and Nan Sheng and said. Xiang Chu nodded and faintly said, "It's my duty." Nan Sheng's face flashed a trace of malice and viciousness as he stroked his broken finger and coldly declared, "This time our 2 families have dispatched 2 peak Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters in order to contain that Ingjiu. As long as we can avenge my broken finger, my Nan family will follow the 2 young lords' orders." Kang Zhan glanced at him and nodded slightly, no longer saying anything. Yang Kai had a peak Immortal Ascension Boundary Demon in his house, and it was because of this demon master's provocation that Yang Zhao had asked the Xiang and Nan families to send 2 peak Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters to assist him. Such a master would rarely appear in the Inheritance War. After all, even first-class forces didn't have many peak Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters. If one of them died in the Inheritance War, it would be a big loss for those forces. However, Xiang Chu and Nan Sheng obviously hated Yang Kai to the extreme, so in the face of Yang Zhao's request, they readily agreed. These 2 masters had only been in Yang Kai's house for about a month. Their original intention was to prepare for a rainy day and suppress the evil demon masters who were targeting Yang Kai's house, but now they had come in handy. Although Ingjiu was a young family blood warrior and his strength was also at the Immortal Ascension Boundary 8th stage, 2 peak Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters should be enough to contain him, right? Regarding this battle, no matter who it was, everyone was full of confidence. None of them could have imagined that the current Ingjiu was already a peak Immortal Ascension Boundary Master. More and more people were sent out to investigate the surrounding situation, all of them holding their breaths and restraining their auras as they waited quietly. A day later, there was finally news. About 100 people were approaching this place. In about an hour, they would arrive here. Kang Zhan's expression shook as he shouted, "Everyone, if we can eliminate Yang Kai here, after returning to the house, second young lord will definitely look upon us in a new light. I hope all of you will not underestimate this enemy." Everyone nodded. "Should we launch a sneak attack?" Qiu Zirua asked excitedly. Kang Zhan glanced over at him and frowned, shaking his head. "Our scouts were able to discover them, so they must have also discovered us. How can we launch a sneak attack? Let's fight openly. I want Yang Kai to regret offending me." Nan Sheng grinned, his yuan qi rising fiercely. "That's right, We'll go out and fight openly. After today, there will no longer be a Yang Kai in the inheritance war. Kang Zhan shouted, "Let's go." 30 kilometers away, Yang Kai's expression was gloomy, unable to figure out where he had gone wrong. Yang Zhao had only been able to infer his actions based on the movements of Bamboo Knot Gang's sect master Pang Qi, so how could Yang Kai have known? When he discovered that someone was spying on them from a distance, he immediately realized that something was wrong. The other party had been able to block his path back so clearly, obviously they knew where he was going. It was impossible for Pang Qi to betray him. He should still be in Qiu Yimeng's house, and Qiu Yimeng wouldn't have leaked this information. The problem lay with the other members of the Bamboo Knot Gang. In an instant, Yang Kai came to a conclusion. It seemed that he would have to clean up after returning. However, even so, Yang Kai didn't regret his actions. If he could choose again, he would still choose to come out and greet the High Heaven Pavilion people. All for the sake of meeting Su Yan earlier. Perceiving the change in Yang Kai's mood, Su Yan couldn't help asking, "What's wrong?" Yang Kai smiled slightly and shook his head. "Nothing, there's just someone blocking the way." Su Yan's face immediately became gloomy. Last time, she and Yang Kai had agreed to travel the world hand in hand, but Qiu Yimeng had disrupted their plans, causing them to be separated for more than a year. This time, she had only just reunited with Yang Kai, but now she had run into trouble again. Su Yan hated these people who disrupted her time with Yang Kai. Who's blocking the way? The several High Heaven Pavilion martial uncles behind suddenly became nervous. It's probably my second brother's people. Yang Kai took a deep breath. Yang Wei shouldn't have done such a thing, nor did he have the capital to do so. Inferring, the people blocking the way should be Yang Zhao's subordinates. Several martial uncles, there may be a fight. You don't need to worry about me, just protect the sect's disciples. Can't we avoid them? The current strength of High Heaven Pavilion's people was too weak, so the several martial uncles were obviously fighting. They came prepared, we can't avoid them. Yang Kai shook his head helplessly, his heart filled with annoyance. Chapter 508. Even though High Heaven Pavilion was only a second-class sect, it still had several thousand disciples. However, after the last calamity, only 100 or so disciples remained loyal to the sect. Although there were still many people in High Heaven Pavilion, their loyalty to the sect was obviously not as good as the disciples here. These people were the foundation of High Heaven Pavilion's revival. They absolutely could not suffer any more losses. The news of a possible battle quickly spread, and although many of the High Heaven Pavilion disciples were somewhat surprised, none of them showed any fear. On the contrary, people like Sassafras actually showed some excitement. They had been hiding from the wind and waves for more than a year, and they had had enough of hiding. Now that they had Kai Yang's protection, they naturally didn't need to fear anything. Instead, they felt a little ignorant, because they didn't know what kind of enemy they were about to face. Yang Kai's brow furrowed. Yang Kai sending people to intercept them was completely beyond his expectations. Since the other party dared to do this, they must be confident they could at least delay Jiao. This meant that the other party had a peak Immortal Ascension boundary master. However, the other party sending such a large number of people would certainly not be able to hide from Qiu Yimeng's spies. Perhaps, the people from his residence were also rushing over here. Considering all this, Yang Kai suddenly felt relieved. Moreover, this wasn't a dead end. They had probably misjudged Jiao's true strength. Now that he had reached the Immortal Ascension boundary 9th stage, his combat power was much greater than before. They didn't know his true strength, and there was also the variable Su Yan. If Yang Zhao's manpower was based on the previous situation, then this time was a good opportunity. But soon, Yang Kai found that he had underestimated Yang Zhao's fear of him. Suddenly, a dense crowd of people appeared in front of him. Yang Kai swept the crowd with his divine sense and couldn't help smiling bitterly. The other party had dispatched at least 7 forces. Among them, Yang Kai recognized 4 of them, the Qiu family and Kang family of the central capital, as well as the Xiang family and Nan family of the first-class forces. It could be said that this was a group of well-trained people. At first glance, seeing so many people, the High Heaven Pavilion members couldn't help but be surprised. They hadn't expected the other side to have so many people. The martial uncles were even more shocked. They instantly understood how important Yang Kai was to the enemy. In order to capture him, they didn't hesitate to send so many people, so many experts. In the wilderness, the two groups of people collided. They were separated by a distance of over 300 meters as they looked at each other from afar. Two pairs of venomous eyes swept over. Following their gazes, Yang Kai rushed towards Xiangchu and Nansheng and sneered. Qiu Zirua's expression was complicated as he stared at the fearless Yang Kai, not knowing what to think. Kang Zhan, on the other hand, remained calm. On the other hand, many of the others were pointing at Su Yan, who was standing beside Yang Kai. Such a person with such a tranquil temperament was naturally very eye-catching. Looking at her, whether man or woman, old or young, all of them couldn't help feeling a sense of inferiority. Even the two young lords from the central capital felt the same. It wasn't that they hadn't seen beautiful women before. With their identity and status, they could have as many as they wanted. However, Su Yan's temperament made them feel that even they weren't qualified to associate with her. On the contrary, when Yang Kai stood next to her, it was as if they were a perfect match. Thinking so, Qiu Zirua and Kang Zhan's faces couldn't help going black. They didn't think they were any worse than Yang Kai. Lightly coughing, Kang Zhan cupped his fists and shouted, "Ninth young lord, it's been a long time." "Brother Kang." Yang Kai nodded lightly, his expression calm. "Is my second brother not here?" "Second young lord is busy. This time it was me and brother Qiu who were entertaining ninth young lord. I hope ninth young lord can be magnanimous." Yang Kai sneered and stepped forward, proudly saying, "My second brother didn't come personally and instead sent you two here to be scapegoats." Kang Zhan's face sank as he coldly said, "Ninth young lord, brother Qiu and I are friends. You don't need to speak so harshly, right? I and you too have some kind of friendship?" Yang Kai tilted his head and chuckled, "How come I don't remember?" With Kang Zhan and Qiu Zirua, it could be said that Yang Kai didn't have any communication with them. The former, on the other hand, had a few drinks with him not long after returning to the central capital, but they ended up parting on bad terms. As for Qiu Zirua, he hadn't even spoken to him. Kang Zhan let out a sigh of relief and shouted, "Since ninth young lord says so, this Kang won't waste any more words. We really don't have any kind of friendship. Let's see who's the real deal. If you offend me in any way, you can only blame yourself for ninth young lord's bad luck." "Likewise," Kang Zhan continued, "before we left, second young lord told us that if ninth young lord was willing to surrender, we shouldn't embarrass you, so as not to harm your brotherly relationship. So this Kang still has to ask, regarding second young lord's good intentions, is ninth young lord willing to accept?" Yang Kai smiled and shook his head. "You already know, why bother asking?" "Could." Kang Zhan nodded firmly. "Why bother talking nonsense with him? The masters from my Xiang and Nen families will hold back Jiu. The rest of us will rush up and capture him." Nansheng's eyes flashed with anger, wishing he could defeat Yang Kai right now and thoroughly humiliate him in order to vent the resentment in these bastards' hearts. Kang Zhan's brow wrinkled, but he didn't say anything. He knew that Nansheng's resentment towards Yang Kai was quite deep. Moreover, this was exactly what he planned to do. Although Yang Kai had brought a lot of people with him, only a few of them had reached the immortal ascension boundary, so the people from High Heaven Pavilion were nothing in Kang Zhan's eyes. Just as he was about to give the order, Yang Kai's voice called out again, "Brother Kang, how about we discuss this?" "What's the matter?" Kang Zhan frowned. "In this battle, only Jiu and I will fight. If you can defeat me and Jiu, then you'll have earned a great merit in front of my second brother." Listening to him say this, Kang Zhan and Qiu Zirua couldn't help staring at him in disbelief. They hadn't expected that Yang Kai didn't intend to use the 100 or so helpers he had brought with him. Although those 100 or so people were nothing in Kang Zhan's eyes, if they really fought, they would definitely be able to cause some losses to his side. So when he heard Yang Kai's proposal, Kang Zhan subconsciously thought that Yang Kai wanted to play some kind of trick and hesitated. On Yang Kai's side, the several High Heaven Pavilion martial uncles and martial seniors all expressed their willingness to lend a hand. Even if they had to die in battle, they couldn't just stand by and watch, all of them resolute. You can't afford to lose anything. Yang Kai shook his head and refused their good intentions, his expression dignified. I am a young family member, they won't dare kill me. If they can't beat me, I can run, they can't do anything to me. But if you go up and suffer casualties, how can I explain this to Grand Master? Martial uncles and martial seniors don't have to help, but I will. Su Yan stared at Yang Kai firmly. Yang Kai looked at her, pondered for a moment, and then nodded. Su Yan's strength was the same as his own, so he couldn't judge her based on her cultivation. On top of that, if she dual cultivated with him and fought side by side, there may be some unexpected effects. Su Yan smiled. Brother Kong, I've changed my mind. I have 3 people on my side, me, Ing Jiu, and my senior sister Su Yan. Yang Kai shouted casually, defeat us and I'll withdraw from the inheritance war. Kong Zhan was still trying to guess what Yang Kai was planning to do, but when he heard this, his expression became strange. He felt that Yang Kai really did have such a plan and wasn't trying to play some kind of trick. It seems that those people are very important to Yang Kai, even making him want to protect them. Nanxing grinned, his aura becoming dangerous, like a cold viper as he stared towards the High Heaven Pavilion group. Xiang Chu also sneered to the side. Kong Zhan frowned and asked, Ninth Young Lord, can you tell me why? No reason. Yang Kai slowly shook his head. These people are my sect's martial uncles and brothers and sisters. If any of them were to be injured, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to control myself, and if I were to kill them, if I were to kill you and young Master Chiu, you wouldn't be able to return to War City and would have no way to explain to the Kong family and Chiu family. Evil Sect's High Heaven Pavilion? Kong Zhan and Chiu Zirua's expressions changed, suddenly understanding what sect these 100 or so people belonged to, a trace of dread appearing in their hearts. High Heaven Pavilion couldn't be treated the same as other second-class sects. It was a sect that had produced a demon lord. This proposal is good for both you and me. How about Brother Kong consider it carefully? Yang Kai urged. Young Lord Kong, don't agree. Nanxing licked his lips as he gloomily stared at the group. Evil sects people can be killed by anyone. Who knows when a new demon lord will appear among these people? Killing all of them now would be a good precaution. I think so too. Xiang Chu nodded in agreement. Kong Zhan glanced over at them and snorted, knowing that they wanted to take advantage of the situation. Yang Kai had already made his intentions clear, yet they still wanted to counterattack Yang Kai, obviously wanting him to suffer in order to avenge their past grievances. Chiu Zirua shook his head and said, Brother Kong, I don't think there's anything wrong with agreeing. In this situation, we have the absolute advantage. At the right time, we can sell him a favor. I don't think Second Young Lord is willing to go too far. In Chiu Zirua's opinion, capturing Yang Kai this time was already a foregone conclusion, without any suspense. Since that was the case, there was no need to really provoke him. Killing the 100 or so people from High Heaven Pavilion wouldn't help them win the inheritance war. It would only make Yang Kai bear a grudge against everyone here. Chiu Zirua didn't want to be targeted by Yang Kai. After all, he was a somewhat unruly man. Hearing this, Kong Zhan nodded gently. What Brother Chiu says makes sense. Nanxing and Xiang Chu glanced at each other and couldn't help seeing the annoyance in each other's hearts. In front of them was a perfect opportunity to retaliate against Yang Kai, but they didn't have the right to choose, so naturally they were feeling depressed. Ninth Young Lord, I agree. Kong Zhan shouted loudly, this battle won't affect your sect's people, provided they don't intervene, otherwise, they'll be responsible for their own deaths. Of course. Yang Kai gently sighed and smiled. In fact, I'm doing this for your own good. Chapter 509. Listening to Yang Kai's words, even Kong Zhan, who had a good temper, couldn't help coldly snorting, shameless boasting. Agreeing to his proposal was nothing more than not wanting to annoy him. In Kong Zhan's opinion, he was simply giving him face, but now the other party was actually saying it was for his own good. Naturally, he was annoyed by this kind of excuse of waiting for an advantage and pretending to be obedient. Not bothering with this, Kang Zhan waved his hand. "Brother Xiang, Brother Nan, send your people out." Xiang Chu and Nanxing nodded, and in the next moment, 2 streaks of light shot out from the crowd. Their speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they had arrived in front of Yang Kai and the others. One of these 2 was from the Xiang family while the other was from the Nan family, both old men at the peak immortal ascension boundary. If it weren't for Xiang Chu and Nanxing asking for help from their families, the Xiang and Nan family wouldn't have sent them to participate in the inheritance war. Without any hesitation, the 2 of them immediately attacked Ingjiu. Ferocious attacks filled the air as they flew towards Ingjiu, intending to severely injure him. 2 peak immortal ascension boundary masters attacking at the same time was truly extraordinary. In just a moment, all the High Heaven Pavilion members felt like they were about to fall apart. This unparalleled power seemed to have created a vortex that sucked in all of their lives. Everyone was shocked, their faces pale. Under such overwhelming power, the High Heaven Pavilion members couldn't even muster up the will to resist. Nansheng and Xiang Chu both sneered proudly, secretly looking forward to the moment when Ingjiu would be forced to use his mad tyrant blood skill. Ingjiu's expression remained indifferent, and just as this violent attack was about to reach him, he suddenly disappeared. The masters from the Xiang and Nan families were startled, instantly losing their target. Immediately, a sense of foreboding filled their hearts. Hurriedly retreating, a murderous intent quietly approached them from behind. A silhouette so fast that the naked eye could not see it clearly was waving 2 daggers that flickered with cold light, coming from behind to attack. Shadow dancing kill. The void was filled with violent energy, and ripples spread out in all directions like ripples that were created when something was thrown into a lake. Xiang Chu and Nansheng's proud expressions instantly froze, their eyes trembling violently as they stared at the sky in disbelief. Kang Zhan and Qiu Zirua were also stunned. Everyone shuddered at the strength Ingjiu had displayed. Yang Kai chuckled and said lightly, "Martial uncles, please lead the brothers back a little." The several martial uncles and martial uncles seemed to have awoken from a dream. In the midst of a battle between 3 peak immortal ascension boundary masters, they instantly understood that even if they joined the fray, they would only be able to cause more unnecessary deaths, so they quickly led everyone away. Only Yang Kai and Su Yan were left standing side by side. A gust of wind blew past, sweeping up Su Yan's long hair, covering half of her face. Turning her head, she and Yang Kai exchanged a glance, both of them smiling knowingly. Swish, swish, swish. In the sky, the 3 people fighting fiercely separated and looked at each other. Ingjiu was the same as before, his expression indifferent, his body unscathed. On the contrary, the faces of the masters from the Xiang and Nan families were ashen. Many of their robes were torn, and although they weren't injured, this battle made everyone realize that Ingjiu was no longer the same Ingjiu as before. It also made them realize just how terrifying the combat power of the Yang family blood warriors was. Invincible within the same realm, fighting above one's realm was a common occurrence. This was the Yang family blood warrior. 2 isn't enough. Ingjiu gripped his 2 daggers in both hands, faintly shaking his head towards the 2 masters from the Xiang and Nan families. These words irritated the 2 masters, causing their expressions to become even uglier. "Brother Kang, Ingjiu seems to have broken through to the Immortal Ascension Boundary 9th stage." Qiu Zirua also saw the situation had taken a turn for the worse. In their original plan, with 2 peak Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters entangled with Ingjiu, as long as they lost this powerful ally, the rest of them would be able to capture Yang Kai. But now, Si Yang was actually an Immortal Ascension Boundary 9th stage Ingjiu, ruining their original plan. If 2 isn't enough, then send more people up. Kang Zhan was also stunned for a moment before coldly saying. Qiu Zirua nodded, nodding to several masters in his camp who immediately flew up and stood behind the 2 masters from the Xiang and Nan families. 2 Immortal Ascension 8th stage and 2 Immortal Ascension 7th stage masters. In addition to the 2 Immortal Ascension Boundary 9th stage masters from before, a total of 6 people were confronting Ingjiu, but Ingzio's expression remained unchanged. Instead, the four masters who had just stepped up looked uneasy. Still not enough. Ingzio shook his head. You want to restrain me? Send more people. Kang Zhan and Qiu Zirua's expression became cold, secretly thinking that this Ingzio was too arrogant. Even if he was a Yang family blood warrior, even if he was an Immortal Ascension 9th stage master, in the end, he was still just one person. Mad Tyrant Blood Skill. Ingzio suddenly shouted, his vitality madly rising, his yuan qi also fluctuating violently. Everyone's expression changed greatly, never having expected Ingzio to so decisively use the Blood Warrior's forbidden technique. This was a secret technique that forcibly increased one's vitality at the cost of one's own vitality. Every time it was used, a Blood Warrior's lifespan would be greatly reduced. Therefore, the Yang family Blood Warriors, no matter how strong they were, generally didn't have long lifespans. In the blink of an eye, Ingzio's aura changed, his previous indifferent aura becoming extremely violent, his entire exposed skin becoming as red as a roasted crab, a terrifying red. Shua. Ingzio seemed to move, but also didn't, but the masters who were confronting him were all shocked, all of them involuntarily retreating a few steps. The sound of blood splashing rang out, and a moment later, an Immortal Ascension Boundary 7th stage master who hadn't even had time to exchange a single blow with Ingzio suddenly fell from the sky with a dull look on his face. From his throat, blood spurted out like a fountain, and before he even hit the ground, his entire body exploded into a bloody mist, not even his bones remaining. A chill rose from the bottom of everyone's heart, causing them to shiver. Do you think it's enough? Ingzio twirled the two daggers in his hands, his fingers dancing gracefully like butterflies, emitting a despairing aura of death. If you think it's enough, then I'll kill you all. As soon as his voice fell, the Immortal Ascension Boundary 9th stage masters from the Xiang and Nen families shouted, "Be careful!" At the same time, all of them stepped forward, summoned their most prized artifacts, and displayed their best methods, sending out a violent wave of energy. Ingzio's figure shuttled back and forth in this wave of energy, like a lone boat in the midst of a violent storm, rising and falling but never sinking. All Immortal Ascension Boundary 8th stage masters, go! Kang Zhan no longer dared to underestimate Ingzio. With his Immortal Ascension Boundary 9th stage strength and his Mad Tyrant blood skill, Ingzio was already capable of exchanging blows with an above Immortal Ascension Boundary master. The few people standing in front of him weren't enough to contain him. Kang Zhan immediately issued an order for reinforcements. Asterisk schwa 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 asterisk from the crowd, 4 or 5 figures appeared one after another, all of them Immortal Ascension Boundary 8th stage cultivator, the number of people these 7 forces could gather. With the addition of these people, Ingzio's leisurely demeanor finally stagnated for a moment, but it still couldn't stop his strange pace. He was like an indestructible sharp blade. Wherever the two daggers slashed, there would be panic in the hearts of the people there. Ingzio, who was proficient in concealment and assassination, in this one versus many situation, actually held the complete dominance, his figure constantly flickering, causing everyone to feel as if a big stone had been lifted from their hearts, not daring to relax in the slightest. It's still not enough. Kang Zhan's eyes flashed a look of despair, but just as he finished speaking, the only remaining Immortal Ascension Boundary 7th stage master in the sky let out a scream and fell to the ground. Elder! Someone exclaimed. This person was from one of the 7 forces. His force wasn't too strong, so the loss of an Immortal Ascension Boundary 7th stage master was not a small blow to the entire force. Glancing around, the Immortal Ascension Boundary 7th stage master's 2 arms had suddenly been separated from his body as he fell, the place where his severed arms had been severed from his body, blood spurting out from them. Send more people. Kang Zhan's face went pale as he continued to order. The several Immortal Ascension Boundary 7th stage masters in the crowd glanced at each other before helplessly rushing forward. With the addition of these people, Ingzio's movements were truly restrained, no longer being able to act as freely as before. With his own strength, he was able to pin down 2 Immortal Ascension Boundary 9th stage masters, 6 Immortal Ascension Boundary 8th stage masters, and 5 Immortal Ascension Boundary 7-stage masters. The strength of the Yang family blood warriors had exceeded everyone's expectations. Even Ingjiu himself was quite surprised. Before his breakthrough, he had often imagined how much his strength would increase after he broke through. He had also accurately estimated that after his breakthrough, his Mad Tyrant blood skill might be able to pin down some masters, but it was absolutely impossible for him to face so many of them now. Such a number and level of masters had greatly exceeded Ingjiu's original estimation of himself. He didn't understand why, but he knew that he had done just that. Although it was somewhat difficult for him to cope with the situation, he wouldn't have to worry about his life in the short term. Was it because of the mysterious grade pills produced in the pill room? Ingjiu didn't know, but all he could do now was exert his strength to the greatest extent possible and reduce the burden on Yang Kai as much as possible. Looking at Ingjiu, who seemed to be struggling, Kang Zhan and Qiu Ziru couldn't help breathing a sigh of relief. This situation was something they had never imagined before, so they secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, the second young lord had prepared ahead of time and had allowed the two of them to bring so many people. If the two of them had followed their original proposal, they probably wouldn't have been able to deal with Ingjiu alone, let alone capture Yang Kai. The second young lord was truly far-sighted. At this moment, both Kang Zhan and Qiu Ziru couldn't help feeling a trace of admiration for Yang Zhao. It's our turn. Kang Zhan took a deep breath and turned his eyes to Yang Kai, who had been standing in place all this time. Ingjiu had already been pinned down, so all that was left was to capture Yang Kai. Although most of the masters had been sent out, Kang Zhan was still confident in capturing Yang Kai. After all, he and Qiu Ziru each had 2 Immortal Ascension 5th stage masters from the 8 great families as well as many from the other forces. With such a lineup, Kang Zhan didn't believe they couldn't capture Yang Kai. Chapter 510. It's our turn. Yang Kai withdrew his gaze from the sky and softly said to Su Yan. Su Yan nodded slightly, brushing her hair back behind her ear as she smiled. This seems to be the 3rd time we've fought side by side. 3 times? Yang Kai was stunned. Did you forget? Su Yan turned her head and glanced at him. The first time was in the Heaven's Cave Inheritance, when you saved my life. The second time was under the coiling dragon stream, when you brought up the rear. This is the 3rd time. Does the first time count? Of course it counts. Su Yan smiled happily and whispered, You helped me the first 2 times, but this time, I'll help you. Yang Kai tilted his head and looked at her, chuckling and nodding, Good. Seeing the two of them whispering to each other, seemingly flirting with each other, Kang Zhan and Qiu Ziru couldn't help feeling their noses become crooked. They felt like they had been completely underestimated. Waving their hands coldly, the 4 Immortal Ascension Boundary 5th stage masters from the Kang and Qiu families stepped forward to meet Yang Kai and Su Yan. Their movements were neither fast nor slow, and their expressions were indifferent. It was obvious that they had full confidence in capturing Kai Yang. The 1,000-meter distance between them was quickly closed. The smile on Yang Kai's face gradually converged as he stared at the 4 approaching masters with a dignified expression. These 4 were not ordinary Immortal Ascension Boundary 5th stage masters, they were Immortal Ascension Boundary masters from the 8 great families, each of them possessing extraordinary means. I should be able to deal with 1.5. Su Yan wrinkled her brow, also feeling a lot of pressure from these 4 masters. I'm about the same. Yang Kai nodded gently, relying on his own strength. He could only accomplish this much, but if he used all of his means, he might not be able to. The 4 masters arrived a few dozen meters in front of Yang Kai and stopped, politely cupping their fists and greeting him. 9th young lord, please excuse us. Life or death is your own responsibility. Yang Kai grinned. His arrogant words caused the 4 people's faces to darken. One of them coldly shouted, 9th young master, just make your move. Before he had even finished speaking, Yang Kai and Su Yan both moved at the same time. One was as hot as the sun, while the other was as cold as ice. 2 completely different energies burst out at the same time. There was no prior communication, no verbal connection, only a spiritual bond, allowing the 2 of them to see through each other's thoughts. A fiery red yuan qi rushed towards them like a raging inferno, enveloping the four of them. Perceiving the power contained in this pure and surging yuan qi, all four of them couldn't help but frown. Only now did they realize that the reason Yang Kai was able to tie with Lu Qingyao that day was not because Lu Qingyao wanted to let him win. He had the strength and capital to do so. Behind the raging flames, sharp icicles lined up like swords, emitting ear-piercing whistling sounds as they shot towards the four people. Tens of thousands of icicles, densely packed together, were like a swarm of locusts, unstoppable, and filled the air with a bone-chilling chill, leaving the four people with no way to advance or retreat. Each icicle contained an extremely cold qi, and its impact was extremely shocking. These icicles were condensed from the ice qi in her body, and even the Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters from the 8 great families didn't dare underestimate them. As soon as Su Yan made a move, it was clearly extraordinary. On the contrary, Yang Kai's hot yuan qi seemed insignificant in comparison. Of the 4 people, 2 didn't move, but the other 2 let out a deep roar at the same time. 7 colored lights shot out from their bodies, forming a thin film in front of them. When the hot true qi and icicles hit them, they were all blocked. Not only that, but the 2 of them also stretched out their hands and sent out a burst of powerful qi, shattering the overwhelming icicles. Yang Kai and Su Yan's first joint attack had been completely ineffective. Just as the 4 Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters relaxed their vigilance, the hot yuan qi and ice qi that had been blocked suddenly underwent an unexpected and mysterious fusion. The attacks that had been blocked for a moment and were about to be annihilated suddenly surged like a tide, pressing in with even more intensity. Compared to before, they were more aggressive and more intimidating. The 4 people's expressions changed greatly, and the 2 Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters who hadn't yet taken action also hurriedly used their own methods. Asterisk hong hong hong. Asterisk like a tidal wave, each attack stronger than the last. The 7-colored defensive film in front of the 4 Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters was shattered, and a cold and hot energy enveloped them, making them thoroughly understand what it meant to be tortured by ice and fire. Kang Zhan and Qiu Zira watched this scene in a daze. The scene in front of them immediately made them realize how big the gap between them and Yang Kai was, and they couldn't help feeling a deep sense of powerlessness. Facing Lu Qingyao, they could still think of catching up, hoping that one day they would be able to catch up to him. But facing Yang Kai, they couldn't bring themselves to do so and could only look up at him from behind. This sense of cowardice and inferiority made Kang Zhan angry, shouting angrily, "Don't show mercy, the 9th young lord won't die so easily." The 4 masters who were resisting the impact of the hot and cold energy all wore cold expressions and no longer held back, madly condensing their strength, and with a roar, they tore open a gap in the ice and fire barrier and leapt out, using all their martial skills and artifacts to greet Yang Kai. Yang Kai had just summoned his bone shield and swallowed a few attacks, but before he had time to counterattack, the 2 masters from the Kang family had already closed in. At such a close distance, the bone shield was unable to absorb enough energy to counterattack. Accompanied by 2 loud roars, Yang Kai sent out his white tiger seal and divine ox seal, fiercely tearing at the 2 masters. Gaining a little time to catch his breath, Yang Kai quickly opened up some distance between himself and the 2 masters, glancing over at Su Yan and quickly discovering that she was being entangled by the 2 masters from the Qiu family. Yang Kai and Su Yan both cultivated the yin-yang joyous unification art, which allowed the 2 of them to display extraordinary strength when fighting side by side, but the other 4 had obviously noticed this at a glance, which was why they had separated him and Su Yan in an attempt to defeat them one by one. If they really fought like this, with the bone shield's protection, there wouldn't be any problems. No matter how powerful these 4's methods were, they wouldn't be able to hurt him, but Su Yan would be in imminent danger. Yang Kai wanted to help and join up with Su Yan, but the 2 masters from the Kang family continued to entangle Yang Kai, not leaving his side. There shouldn't be a problem. Seeing that the situation was good, Kang Zhan finally relaxed and nodded lightly. Qiu Zirua also secretly wiped his cold sweat and smiled bitterly. "I didn't expect 9th young lord's methods to be so amazing. He's strong, I can understand that, But who is that woman? How is she so strong? Kang Zhan stared at Su Yan, a puzzled look on his face. That woman is definitely the most important one to Yang Kai. Nanxing grinned meaningfully, his expression becoming somewhat restless. Since he wanted to retaliate against Yang Kai, naturally he wanted to teach him the most profound and painful lesson. If this woman was accidentally killed by the two masters from the Qiu family, that would be interesting. Nanxing was secretly looking forward to it. Although he knew it was unlikely to happen, he couldn't help thinking so. He even wondered if he should intervene and create some kind of unexpected situation. However, when he saw the tyrannical strength of this woman, Nanxing still felt a little discouraged. His strength wasn't high, so even if he went up, it would be useless. Young Lord Nan, this time we're only here to capture Yang Kai, Kang Zhan saw through his thoughts and warned. Haha, I know, Nanxing nodded. While they were talking, the four Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters began suppressing Yang Kai and Su Yan more and more. The Masters from a superforce were really different. Even if there were only two Immortal Ascension Boundary 5th Stage Masters, Yang Kai was still able to suppress them. Between the two of them, he couldn't rush to Su Yan's aid, nor could he release the energy in his bone shield to counterattack, so he could only passively defend. Seeing that the situation on Su Yan's side was getting worse and worse, Yang Kai's expression gradually became cold. The bone shield in his hand that had been acting as a defensive shield suddenly disappeared and was replaced by an antique-looking mirror. This mirror exuded a bone-chilling aura, and on its surface there was even a faint snowy white image. A dangerous aura spread out from the mirror. Realizing that something was wrong, the two masters from the Kang family both paled and rushed towards Yang Kai, trying to interfere with his actions. But it was too late. Suddenly, a ripple spread out from the mirror. As the ripple spread, an icy chill instantly enveloped this part of the world. An incomparably huge, snowy barrier suddenly appeared, enveloping Yang Kai, Su Yan, and the four Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters from the Kang family and Qiu family. A mysterious grade artifact. Kang Zhan exclaimed. Looking around, he couldn't see anything but the white snow around him. Inside the enchantment on the ground, there was only wind and snow that filled the sky. Just by looking at it, one could not help but feel a bone-piercing chill, let alone being inside it. A few strange peaks were faintly discernible within the barrier, and they were covered in a silvery white color. How could it be a mysterious grade artifact? Kang Zhan's face went pale. Although he knew that Yang Kai had another mysterious grade artifact in addition to his bone shield, he had never expected it to be of this type. When such an artifact was summoned, it was tantamount to isolating the two sides inside the barrier, making it impossible for them to come out until a winner was decided. As the owner of this artifact, Yang Kai undoubtedly had an absolute advantage in this battle. The attributes of this artifact seemed to be the same as that woman's secret art. In an instant, Kang Zhan realized that the situation wasn't good. The power of a mysterious grade artifact was something he had experienced deeply. As the young lord of one of the central capital's 8 great families, he naturally had a mysterious grade artifact on him. Hurry up and break the defenses of this artifact. Kang Zhan instantly ordered, leading a group of people with Qiu Zirua to quickly rush forward. Inside the silvery white world, Yang Kai and Su Yan finally reunited. Looking around at the snowy white scenery and the towering ice mountains, Su Yan couldn't help taking a deep breath, her full breasts bouncing up and down as a look of excitement appeared on her face. Being in this place, she felt like she was in heaven, her yuan qi circulating several times faster than usual. Chapter 511. As soon as this mirror-shaped mysterious grade artifact was summoned, Su Yan's aura underwent an earth-shattering change. She was obviously standing right next to Yang Kai, but in the eyes of the 4 masters from the Kang family and Qiu family, she seemed to be everywhere. In other words, this woman, at this moment, had become one with this mysterious grade artifact, inseparable. The 4 masters paled, unable to understand why this was happening. This mysterious grade artifact was clearly taken out by Yang Kai. How could this woman produce such a resonance with this artifact? This phenomenon was also noticed by Yang Kai and Su Yan, both of them exchanging a glance with each other, seeing the excitement in each other's eyes. Before using this mirror artifact, Yang Kai had not expected such an effect. But now he understood. He and Su Yan both cultivated the joyous unification art, so their bodies and minds were bound together. The artifacts he refined could, to a certain extent, be used by Su Yan. Correspondingly, the artifacts Su Yan refined could also be used by Yang Kai. It was equivalent to the two of them sharing each other's artifacts. In particular, this ice attribute artifact was very compatible with Su Yan's Yuan Qi attribute. It could be said that it was tailor-made for her. Su Yan could fully utilize the functions of this artifact, something even Yang Kai could not do. After all, Yang Kai's Yuan Qi attribute was completely opposite to this artifact's. When Yang Kai had obtained this artifact at Pajing Lake, it was only because he felt that its grade might be relatively high, an unintentional action that had led to the current situation. It's a barrier-type artifact. One of the Kong family masters observed the surroundings, his expression becoming dignified. The others also nodded. They were all knowledgeable people, so naturally they could see the tyrannical nature of this artifact at a glance. The periphery of this artifact was covered by a layer of barriers, creating a territory suitable for battle. Without breaking this barrier, it was impossible to break through the blockade of this artifact. However, wanting to break through this barrier was definitely not an easy task, especially under the watchful eyes of Yang Kai and Su Yan. How could the four of them dare to act rashly? The chilly wind whistled, the ground was covered with a thick layer of snow, and the sky was still constantly sprinkling snow like goose feathers. Even the Yuan Qi seemed to be frozen. The four masters madly circulated their secret arts, but they were still unable to resist the erosion of the cold. In just a moment, their hair, beards, and clothes were all covered in frost. "How do you feel?" Yang Kai did not pay any attention to the four masters and instead asked Su Yan. "My strength has increased. I feel like I'm to the point of omnipotence." Su Yan lightly breathed in the cold air, but to her, it was to no avail. Su Yan, Yang Kai, and Yang Kai. To her, to him, to say, to her to him, to her, to him, she was to him. Yang Kai laughed. "Good, then this artifact will be yours to use from now on." Su Yan nodded lightly, not showing any intention of refusing. Accepting a gift from her man was a matter of course. The conversation between the two reached the ears of the four immortal ascension boundary masters, causing them to suddenly become displeased. Although this mysterious great artifact was amazing, they were not mediocre. How could they be so willing to be despised by two juniors? "I'll try," Su Yan said softly, waving her hand casually towards the four masters. The cold wind suddenly became even colder, causing the faces of the four masters to change. Although they still stood firmly in place, under the howling cold wind, their hair and beards began to form slender icicles at a speed visible to the naked eye. The madly circulating Yuan Qi was unable to resist this cold wind, causing the bodies of the four masters to show signs of trembling slightly. Su Yan also began to move, her brow furrowed slightly, seemingly familiarizing herself with the power of this artifact. As she moved, her cold Yuan Qi slowly began to connect with the frozen world around her. Cracking sounds could be heard from the ground as dense ice spikes suddenly shot out from the several feet deep layer of snow, bringing with them a strong wind and rolling up thousands of layers of snow. It was as if a snowy mountain was collapsing as it enveloped the four of them. There was no road to heaven, no door to earth. The four masters from the superforces all felt extremely troubled. The speed of the Yuan Qi circulation had been greatly affected by the cold, causing them to be unable to react as quickly as they had been at their peak. Hurriedly, they used their martial skills and artifacts to block this attack, but before they had time to catch their breath, Su Yan's next attack had already arrived. On the surrounding icebergs that were wrapped in silver, rays of light as bright as day flashed. It seemed that in the distance, someone was throwing a fierce attack at the four of them. Yang Kai stood beside Su Yan, motionless, his mood fluctuating. He hadn't expected that with the help of such a mysterious great artifact, Su Yan would be able to display such strength. With just her own strength, she was able to force 4 Immortal Ascension 5th Stage Masters from the central capital 8 great families to such an extent that they could only defend without any opportunity to counterattack. This artifact had created the most ideal battle environment for Su Yan. In this world, she was the master of all. He, who should have been the owner of this artifact, had instead become a spectator. The power of this artifact was indeed terrifying, but Su Yan's strength was also indisputable. The combination of the strong and the strong had created the scene in front of him. Defeating these 4 masters was only a matter of time. Seeing Su Yan's performance, Yang Kai's heart calmed down. Outside the barrier, Kang Zhan and Rua had already rushed over with their own people, none of them daring to approach within a 300-meter radius. The cold aura emanating from inside was too strong, so even if they were 300 meters away, they still had to circulate their secret arts to resist the cold. "Break it!" Kang Zhan roared, taking the lead, taking out a mysterious grade artifact he normally wouldn't use, pouring his yuan qi into it and attacking the semicircular barrier in front of him. Layers of ripples quickly appeared on the barrier, and the wind and snow drifting inside seemed to suddenly stop, for a moment. After this attack, Kang Zhan was slightly out of breath. His strength wasn't very high, so using a mysterious grade artifact put a heavy burden on him. Fortunately, Rua also had an artifact of the same grade, and the other cultivator were also frantically releasing their own attacks. After a series of attacks, the barrier seemed to show signs of weakening, allowing Kang Zhan to see some hope, shouting excitedly, "Don't stop, hurry up and break it open." The longer this battle dragged on, the more unfavorable it would be for his side. Most of the masters had already been sent out to contain Yingjiu, so if the 4 Immortal Ascension boundary masters from the central capital 8 great families were also killed inside this barrier, Kang Zhan really couldn't think of any means to capture Yang Kai. Right now, Kang Zhan was more anxious than anyone else. Everyone was unceremoniously pouring out their yuan qi, only wanting to break open the semicircular barrier in front of them as quickly as possible. Suddenly, a few shouts came from not far away, causing Kang Zhan to be startled. Quickly turning his head to look, his face suddenly became livid as he shouted angrily, "Xiang Chu, Nansheng, what are you doing?" Over there, Xiang Chu and Nansheng had actually led the Xiang and Nan family forces to sneak over to where the High Heaven Pavilion group was. Since the start of the battle, these people had been standing here, quietly observing the situation, as if Yang Kai and Kang Zhan had agreed, not intending to intervene in the battle. However, when everyone was attacking the barrier, Nansheng and Xiang Chu turned their attention to them. After a brief moment, they were discovered by Kang Zhan. Nansheng, who was facing off against the High Heaven Pavilion group, suddenly showed an impatient expression, ignoring Kang Zhan's questioning and shouting towards the High Heaven Pavilion group, "Obediently surrender, otherwise I'll make you suffer. I don't have time to play with you." The several martial uncles and grandmasters all wore ugly expressions as they stood in front of the young disciples. Although their hearts were filled with anger, they couldn't do anything about it, quickly asking, "Two friends, just now my martial nephew Yang reached an agreement with your leader, why do you still want to go back on your word?" Nansheng sneered, "What agreement? I don't know, but if you want to find someone who reached an agreement with Yang Kai, then go find them. Do you really think your High Heaven Pavilion is a tiger's ass that can't be touched? This young master will make a move today and see what Yang Kai can do to me." "Your Excellency, don't go too far." "Go too far?" Nansheng laughed. "Go tell that to Yang Kai and see if he knows what it means to go too far." Saying so, he coldly shouted, "Surround them, anyone who dares to resist, kill without question. Doesn't Yang Kai care about you? I'd like to see how much he cares about you." The people from the Nan family and Xiang family all rushed forward and surrounded the High Heaven Pavilion group, all of them glaring at Nansheng. The High Heaven Pavilion group was furious, and the younger generation disciples were even more enraged. Seeing that the situation was about to escalate into a fight between the two sides, Kang Zhan hurriedly rushed over and grabbed Nansheng's collar, gritting his teeth as he shouted, "What are you doing?" Nansheng didn't seem to care and just smiled lightly, reaching out and breaking Kang Zhan's grip, lightly saying, "Young Lord Kong, do you think the 4 masters from your Kong family and Chiu family can catch Yang Kai?" Kong Zhan frowned, his expression becoming unpleasant as he coldly snorted, "What does catching him have to do with what you're doing now?" "Naturally it has something to do with it." Nansheng's expression was calm, not showing the slightest tension. "If those 4 people can't catch Yang Kai, this operation can basically be considered a failure. We've dispatched so many people, yet we can't even defeat 3 of them, if word of this spreads out. Hee hee, young Lord Kong, I don't need to explain what the consequences will be, right?" "What do you mean?" Kong Zhan gradually calmed down. Just now, when he saw Nansheng and Xiang Chu acting against the High Heaven Pavilion group, he thought these 2 guys were going to start a massacre to vent their anger. Naturally, he was furious. First, Nansheng and Xiang Chu didn't put his orders in their eyes, and second, he didn't want to offend Yang Kai too much. However, since no one had died and no one had been injured, Kong Zhan was willing to listen to his explanation. Moreover, the current situation wasn't optimistic. If they really allowed Yang Kai to escape, they wouldn't be able to explain it to Yang Zhao. Their status wasn't as good as Yi Xan Rose, so if they were to do this, their status would likely be even lower in the future. Chapter 5:12. Nothing. Facing Kong Zhan's question, Nansheng smiled coldly. "I just want to say that as long as we have a bargaining chip in hand, even if the 4 seniors fail, we can still occupy the dominant position. Whether Yang Kai will surrender because of them, I don't know, but it's unlikely, but we can still retreat. Young Master Kong has also seen the power of that mysterious grade artifact of his. If he is determined to kill us here, who can stop him?" Kong Zhan's expression changed as he carefully considered Nansheng's words and couldn't help feeling that what he said made sense. It was obvious that Yang Kai really cared about these people from High Heaven Pavilion, otherwise, he wouldn't have negotiated with Kong Zhan. With his temperament, if anyone dared to stand in his way, Kong Zhan was certain he wouldn't hesitate to attack. Using these people as bargaining chips to force Yang Kai to submit? Even if that didn't work, they could still retreat calmly. Young Master Kong shouldn't still be worried about your verbal agreement with Yang Kai, right? Nansheng saw his hesitation and sneered. Kong Zhan's expression became ugly, but he didn't deny it. Although the agreement just now was only a verbal one, for a young lord like Kong Zhan, he still cared about his promises. Since he had agreed with Yang Kai not to move against these people from High Heaven Pavilion, if he went back on his word, it would be inappropriate. "Young Master Kong, do you really want to see Yang Kai use that artifact to kill all of us here?" Nansheng struck while the iron was hot and continued to persuade him. Xiang Chu, who had not spoken until now, also spoke up. "Young Master Kong, please reconsider. Perhaps you think we are doing this to avenge a personal grudge. I won't deny that I hate Yang Kai to the extreme, but Big Brother Nan and I are also thinking about everyone here." Taking a deep breath, Kong Zhan's hesitation turned into determination, nodding. "Fine, let's do as you say." He was really afraid of Yang Kai and didn't have any expectations for these 4 immortal ascension boundary masters. Nansheng and Xiang Chu heard this and were overjoyed. Since participating in the inheritance war until now, they had finally seized an opportunity to retaliate against Yang Kai. Naturally, they were quite happy. "Don't be too ruthless, just capture 2 people. Kong Zhan frowned and ordered. "All right." Nansheng nodded and grinned, his eyes sweeping over the High Heaven Pavilion disciples. Reaching out, he pointed at a High Heaven Pavilion disciple and immediately had someone rush in to grab him. That martial uncle didn't resist, and even stopped the younger generation of disciples from stirring. He slowly shook his head at the crowd. Right now, the enemy was strong and they were weak. If they really fought, it wouldn't be strange for them to be completely wiped out here. It would be better to endure for a while. Seeing that the High Heaven Pavilion members didn't resist, Nansheng and Xiang Chu couldn't help showing a look of disappointment and disdain. "Cowards." Kong Zhan's brow furrowed. He didn't like the way they were trying to provoke High Heaven Pavilion, but he didn't say anything. Nansheng's eyes continued to wander through the crowd, looking for a suitable target. Suddenly, he felt a ruthless gaze directed towards him. He couldn't help but sneer as he pointed at that person and said, Capture him too. As soon as these words were spoken, the Nan family's masters captured the High Heaven Pavilion disciple. This person didn't look very old, even younger than Yang Kai, and his strength wasn't very high, only Yuan Qi boundary 5th stage. Obviously, his aptitude wasn't bad. It was because of this that Nan Xing had chosen him. The 2 High Heaven Pavilion disciples, one old and one young, were captured and brought before Nan Xing. The older generation disciple's expression was calm, neither servile nor overbearing, while the younger disciple simply sneered and stared at Nan Xing stubbornly and proudly. "Your eyes aren't bad." Nan Xing nodded, suddenly swinging his hand and slapping out. With a loud bang, the young disciple's face was painted with a 5-finger mark and one of his teeth was knocked out. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth as his head was slapped to the side. Turning his head, he still stared at Nan Xing with that same ruthless gaze, not saying a word. The veins on Nan Xing's forehead throbbed. He had never expected this person to be so stubborn. Feeling annoyed, he sent out another slap and sneered, "Ignorant fool." After the 2 slaps, the young disciple's cheeks were swollen and his mouth was full of dirty blood. However, the look in his eyes did not change at all. He did not even show any fear. There was only a kind of determination that could be killed but not humiliated. Kang Zhan couldn't help but be slightly moved, seemingly surprised by the performance of this High Heaven Pavilion disciple. "What's your name?" Kang Zhan asked. The young disciple glanced at him faintly and proudly said, "Sassafras." "Sassafras." Kang Zhan took a deep breath and murmured, nodding, "High Heaven Pavilion really is extraordinary." If an ordinary young disciple had such courage, what about the others? These people, even if they were killed, would they surrender and beg for mercy? Kang Zhan didn't know why, but he was certain of this. Sassafras sneered, "You can only act ruthlessly in front of me. When my brother Yang comes out, you'll show him what you've got." Kang Zhan's face went black. Just as Sassafras said, he really didn't dare act ruthlessly in front of Yang Kai. Nan Xing became even angrier and kicked Sassafras's knee. Sassafras didn't resist and knelt to the ground. The next moment, Nan Xing sent out a flurry of slaps. Kang Zhan didn't even have time to stop before Sassafras was slapped a dozen more times. The sound of these slaps was extremely harsh. No one from High Heaven Pavilion moved, only the sound of their breathing gradually becoming heavier. Everyone's eyes were red as they stared at Nan Xing like man-eating beasts. The silent and calm atmosphere was like the calm before a storm, causing Kang Zhan to shudder and quickly shout, "Enough!" Nan Xing stopped and took a deep breath before reaching out and pinching Sassafras's mouth, pulling out a sword from one of the men beside him and placing it across Sassafras's neck, coldly saying, "You think I don't dare kill you? You don't have the guts." Sassafras's mouth was covered in blood, but he still sneered, as if he had lived long enough. Nan Xing's expression suddenly changed, and it was particularly interesting. He looked hesitant and struggled. He slowly increased the strength of the sword in his hand and drew a red line of blood on Su Mu's neck, but he still didn't have the courage to directly cut it. Killing Sassafras wouldn't take much effort, but if Yang Kai were to retaliate, Nan Xing would have to consider whether he could afford it. On the other hand, Sassafras looked calm, without the slightest fear. He was certain that Nan Xing was afraid of Yang Kai. "Let him go." Kang Zhan took a deep breath and slowly shook his head. Nan Xing looked ruthless, but in reality he was nothing more than a pushover who only knew how to squeeze a soft persimmon. Nan Xing clenched his fists and ground his teeth. He wanted to kill this reckless person who dared to provoke him, but he couldn't bring himself to do so. Kang Zhan's words suddenly made him feel like he was riding a tiger. Letting him go was tantamount to admitting that he didn't have the courage. As the young lord of a first-class family, how could Nan Xing afford to lose face like this? His expression becoming fierce, Nan Xing swung his sword in an arc asterisk puff asterisk blood splashed out. The right side of Sassafras's chest was pierced through by the sword. Nan Xing's expression was fierce as he threw Sassafras to the ground. The High Heaven Pavilion disciples were shocked and quickly rushed forward to help him up. "You really think I don't dare to touch you?" Nan Xing spat, his face twitching. "You bastard!" Kang Zhan was also stunned, roaring angrily as he kicked Nanxing's body, causing him to stagger. When Nanxing hit Sassafras just now, he hadn't tried to stop him. After all, it was just a superficial wound, so even if he was beaten miserably, it wouldn't hurt his muscles or bones. After a few days of rest, he would be fine. In Yang Kai's eyes, this sword strike was enough to kill him. However, it was also obvious that Nanxing had hesitated when he attacked. He had chosen to stab Sassafras in the right side of his chest. If it had been the left side where his heart was, Sassafras would have immediately died. Shouts and curses came from the mouths of the High Heaven Pavilion disciples, many of them frantically attacking the Xiang and Nan family cultivator. "Don't resist!" Kang Zhan roared at the Xiang and Nan family cultivator, rushing forward, taking out a jade bottle from his sleeve, shaking his hand as he poured out a pill and stuffed it directly into Sassafras's bloody mouth. During this time, Kang Zhan was also attacked a few times by the High Heaven Pavilion disciples, but fortunately, he was wearing a defensive artifact armor so he wasn't injured. Perceiving his intentions, the people gathered around Sassafras didn't embarrass him anymore, several of his martial uncles even hurriedly helping Sassafras neutralize the effects of the pill. Qua. A crisp sound suddenly came from not far away. Kang Zhan turned his head to look and saw the barrier created by the mysterious grade mid-rank artifact shatter and disappear with a bang. The snow and wind that had filled the sky also disappeared. At the center of the barrier, Yang Kai and the woman from before appeared in front of everyone's eyes, wrapped in a cold wind. Near them, there were 4 things that looked like ice sculptures. They were arranged in all kinds of strange poses and stood there quietly. These were the 4 masters belonging to the Kang and Qiu families. From the stiff expressions on the faces of the 4 ice sculptures, it was easy to see just how shocked they were before they were frozen. Kang Zhan couldn't help feeling his scalp go numb and the soles of his feet cramp. Although he had faintly felt that these 4 immortal ascension boundary masters wouldn't be able to capture Yang Kai, he hadn't expected such a result. When the cultivator gathered around the barrier saw the figures of Yang Kai and Su Yan, all of them retreated, their faces filled with horror and fear. Among them, there weren't many masters left, and even if there were some immortal ascension boundary masters, they were only at the 4th or 5th stage. The masters from the 8 great families had all been frozen into ice sculptures, so how could they dare think of resisting? Qiu Zirua, who was the leader of this group, went pale, his lips trembling as a sense of horror filled his heart. Yang Kai glanced over at him and said lightly, "They won't die, but if they want to come out, it will take them at least half a day." Qiu Zirua nodded unconsciously and forced a smile. "Many thanks for 9th young lord's mercy." Yang Kai nodded lightly and didn't say anything more. After all, these 4 people were from the central capital's 8 great families. If he wanted to teach them a lesson, injuring them would be fine, even seriously injuring or crippling them would be fine, but he couldn't kill them. Sometimes, when it was necessary to show mercy, it was precisely because of this that Yang Kai had asked Su Yan to spare their lives. He believed that even if they managed to break out of the ice sculptures, it would still take them at least 1 to 2 months to recover. Chapter 5:13. Looking around, Yang Kai immediately noticed the commotion in High Heaven Pavilion's camp. Although he didn't know what was going on, he realized that something was wrong and his expression couldn't help sinking. "Senior brother Yang, senior sister Su." Li Yuntian cried out in a heart-wrenching manner, "Young Master Su! Young Master Su has been stabbed." Su Yan's beautiful face suddenly lost all color, her white figure transforming into a stream of light as she rushed into the crowd, Yang Kai following closely behind. Looking around, Yang Kai couldn't help narrowing his eyes as his face paled. In the crowd, Su Mu looked pale and sat cross-legged on the ground. There was a sharp sword in the right side of his chest, which came out of his body. Blood was foaming from his mouth and nose. His qi and blood were weak, and he gasped for breath, like the old bellows in the blacksmith's shop. A High Heaven Pavilion martial uncle was standing behind him, his hand pressed against his back as he poured yuan qi into his body. Su Yan's eyes suddenly turned red. She and Sassafras had a sibling relationship. Seeing her little brother in such a miserable state, how could she not feel distressed? Yang Kai pushed through the crowd and quickly stepped forward, reaching out and placing his hand on Sassafras' wrist, examining it for a moment before opening Sassafras' mouth and pouring some myriad drug milk into it. Once the myriad drug milk entered his mouth, Yang Kai reached out and pulled out the sword from Sassafras' right chest, causing blood to spurt out. Pouring out a few strands of yuan qi to seal the flow of blood from Sassafras' wound, Yang Kai comforted Su Yen. "It's all right now." Su Yen nodded gently. With the myriad drug milk, Sassafras really wouldn't have to worry about his life and might even have gained some benefits from this disaster and improved his strength a little. But if he and Su Yen hadn't come out in time, half an hour later, it would have been difficult to say what would have happened to Sassafras. Even if he didn't die, he would likely be permanently disabled. Slowly standing up, Yang Kai's expression was calm as he turned around and looked at Kang Zhan, who was standing nearby. Kang Zhan suddenly felt his lips go dry. Yang Kai's silence made him feel at a loss for what to do, suddenly realizing that this was not good. "Who did it?" Yang Kai stared at Kang Zhan and asked softly. Kang Zhan gulped and hesitated. "Ninth young lord, this was just an accident. Who did this?" Kang Zhan frowned. Although he was well aware of Yang Kai's tyrannical strength, he was the one in charge of this operation and was also a young lord of the central capital. Naturally, he wouldn't act too timidly, quickly saying, "Ninth young lord, this is the inheritance war, 1 or 2 deaths are normal. You and I are enemies. Not to mention that this friend's life isn't in danger now. Even if he really died, it wouldn't matter." How many people have died at Ninth Young Master's hands? Indeed, there are quite a few. Yang Kai nodded. "I did kill a lot of people. If their friends and family want revenge, they can come to me. Now that someone has hurt one of my people, I want to take revenge, so I want to know who did it." Kang Zhan was suddenly at a loss for words. Yes, if there was resentment, if there was hatred, if there was hatred, if there was hatred, then there was no need to stop others from taking revenge. What's more, the two of them had agreed before that High Heaven Pavilion's people would not intervene in this battle. Under this premise, if High Heaven Pavilion's people were seriously injured, Kang Zhan really couldn't claim any responsibility. But if he had to betray his own people, Kang Zhan couldn't do it. Doing so would only make him seem too spineless and afraid of Yang Kai. "It's that guy." Li Yuntian suddenly stood up in indignation, pointing to the side and shouting, "2 groups of people just came from that direction. It was that guy who wanted to kill young Master Su." Following the direction of his finger, Yang Kai's eyes landed on Nanxing not far away. Kang Zhan's brow furrowed as he suddenly discovered that Nanxing and Xiang Chu had at some point slipped away and returned to their camp. He had stayed here to clean up their mess, yet they had slipped away without a word, causing Kang Zhan to feel extremely annoyed. "I know." Yang Kai nodded lightly, glancing over at Kang Zhan and saying, "Young Master Kang, I already said that not allowing High Heaven Pavilion's people to participate in this battle was for your own good. If they were injured, I really would have killed them all. It seems you don't believe me." Kang Zhan was startled, but soon his eyes filled with horror. He found that Yang Kai's aura had suddenly become violent and bloody, and a thick murderous aura soared to the sky. Subconsciously, Kang Zhan hurriedly retreated. Yang Kai stared at him coldly, waving his hand and pulling out the sword he had taken from Sassafras's right chest. Wrapped in a cold light, he thrust it towards Kang Zhan. Kang Zhan's expression changed greatly. He hadn't expected Yang Kai to suddenly kill him, hurriedly using his martial skill to resist, but the destructive power contained in this sword was not something a cultivator of his level could block. Pooh. Kang Zhan groaned as the sword pierced through the right side of his chest, just like what had happened to Sassafras a moment ago. Under the huge force, he was forced back a dozen steps before he was able to stabilize his footing. His eyes trembling, Kang Zhan stared at Yang Kai in disbelief. Everyone was silent, their faces filled with horror. From the beginning of the inheritance war until now, a young lord from the central capital's 8 great families had finally been injured, and seriously injured at that. When the young lords and young ladies from the 8 great families participated in the inheritance war, it was generally impossible for them to be injured, let alone risk their lives. No one dared to kill them, at most they would be defeated and forced to retreat. But now, this precedent, which had been maintained for countless years, had been broken. Kang Zhan stared down at the long sword piercing his chest, the stinging pain gradually spreading. Even now, he still couldn't believe that Yang Kai's courage was so great, to the point where he could defy the laws of heaven. Ninth young lord, Kang Zhan muttered, his mouth filled with the taste of blood, his breathing becoming quite labored. Yang Kai glanced over at him coldly. If you weren't from the 8 great families, today you would have died. Kang Zhan's face twitched as a chill spread across his heart. Not daring to fight back, he quickly sat down cross-legged on the ground, took out a pill, and swallowed it. The wind howled as Yang Kai stepped forward, as if a mountain of blood was pressing down on them. Everyone felt the aura of death wash over them. Of Yang Zhao's group, besides Kang Zhan, who was still circulating his secret art to heal himself, the 4 Immortal Ascension Boundary 5th Stage Masters from the 8 great families who had been frozen into ice sculptures, and the dozen or so masters who were being held back by Yingjiu, the rest had all gathered together at this moment. Led by Qiu Zirua, all of them looked over in horror. What do we do? What do we do? Qiu Zirua's face went pale as he constantly asked the people around him. This time's operation should have been commanded by Kang Zhan, but now that he couldn't even protect himself, this heavy responsibility naturally fell to Qiu Zirua. Facing such a strong opponent, even daring to seriously injure Kang Zhan, Yang Kai, Qiu Zirua didn't have the courage to resist. He was afraid he would end up in the same situation as Kang Zhan. If he didn't have an idea, how could anyone else? Nansheng, this is all your fault. Tell me, what do we do now? Qiu Zirua turned to Nansheng and roared. Nansheng's previous arrogance and domineering attitude had long since disappeared. Hearing this, he couldn't help feeling a little dazed, pursing his dry lips, not saying a word. Xiangchu's eyes flashed a trace of contempt and ruthlessness as he said, Young Lord Qiu, no matter how strong Yang Kai is, he's still just one person. What is there to be afraid of? Besides, young Lord Kang also said that this is the inheritance war. 1 or 2 people dying is nothing, not to mention that one person is still alive. Yang Kai is clearly making a mountain out of a molehill. Even if news of this spread back to the central capital, he won't be able to hold his ground. Now is a good opportunity to eliminate Yang Kai. Young Lord Qiu should seize it. We are willing to follow your orders. Bullshit. Qiu Ziru roared, Yang Kai and young Lord Kang already made an agreement, yet you insisted on provoking High Heaven Pavilion's people. Moreover, Yang Kai showed mercy to our people just now, but you, fuck your 18 generations of ancestors. Xiangchu's face went black as he suddenly felt extremely disappointed with Qiu Zirua's cowardice. As they spoke, Yang Kai had already arrived 20 meters in front of the crowd. Facing the 7 forces alone, he wasn't afraid at all. Although the top masters of these forces had all been restrained, there were still a number of them, including a few Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters. Qiu Zirua. Yang Kai shouted, You're Qiu Yimeng's little brother. I don't want to embarrass you, so scram to the side. Qiu Zirua's face suddenly showed a hint of joy, but just as he was about to open his mouth to agree, he suddenly shook his head and said, Ninth young lord, this Qiu is unable to comply with this request. Yang Kai nodded, At least you have some backbone. All of a sudden, light flashed from his hand, and a bone shield appeared in his grasp. It's that mysterious grade artifact. Qiu Zirua and the others' expressions changed slightly. This bone shield had been used by Yang Kai when he attacked Yang Kai's compound and just now, so everyone naturally knew how powerful its defensive power was and how it could absorb energy attacks. With this bone shield in hand, Yang Kai's defense could be said to be impregnable. But at this moment, when Yang Kai took it out, everyone was somewhat confused, secretly wondering if Yang Kai was going to defend himself. But before they could finish their thoughts, a dangerous aura suddenly filled the air. On the bone shield, black lightning flashed, and in the center of the bone shield, a violent energy burst out from the beast's maw. Asterisk Xiu Xiu Xiu. A series of lightning dragons the size of human legs suddenly burst out from the bone shield's maw, each one swaying back and forth, each of them more than 100 meters long, exuding a heaven-destroying momentum as they rushed towards the seven forces. How is this possible? Qiu Zirua exclaimed in shock. There were many types of artifacts, some defensive, some offensive, and some auxiliary. The bone shield in Yang Kai's hand was clearly a defensive artifact, so how could it have become an offensive one? Furthermore, he seemed to have heard of this lightning dragon somewhere before. This is the power of Yang Kang's mysterious grade artifact. Xiang Chu screamed, suddenly realizing that the bone shield in Yang Kai's hand could not only absorb energy attacks but also reflect them back. These lightning dragons were clearly the power of the mysterious grade artifact that Yang Kang had displayed when he had fought Yang Kai more than 2 months ago. At that time, these lightning dragons were swallowed by Yang Kai's bone shield and were only released by Yang Kai 2 months later. Chapter 5:14. Who could resist the power of a mysterious grade artifact? Unless it was also a mysterious grade defensive artifact, like the bone shield in Yang Kai's hand. When the 7 or 8 lightning dragons rushed out from the beast's mouth in the center of the bone shield, everyone was dumbfounded. Their faces were instantly filled with horror and fear. The call of death rang in their ears, and no one could remain calm. If there were still masters here, they could have relied on their heaven-defying methods to block the lightning dragons, but with so many of them trapped or frozen, the rest of them were powerless to resist. Everyone was thrown off their feet, all of them panicked and fled in all directions, trying to escape from the lightning dragon's onslaught. Xiang Chu's mind was still clear, shouting for everyone to work together to resist, but this chaotic scene made him feel powerless. Even Qiu Zirua had run away. How could anyone else stay in place and wait for death? Hong hong hong, *kacha, those lightning dragons were like invincible sharp swords, wrapped in unparalleled power, wreaking havoc in the crowd. Those who were touched by the lightning dragons all convulsed and fell to the ground, unable to get up. There were even some who were directly electrocuted to the point that their entire body was charred. The remaining Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters all protected their own young lords as they tried to avoid the lightning dragon's attack, like stray dogs that had lost their homes. Screams rang out one after another. In front of the power of a mysterious grade artifact, human life was as cheap as grass. Kang Zhan, who had been circulating his secret art to heal himself, slowly opened his eyes and stared at the miserable scene before him, his heart going cold. Only now did he realize that what Yang Kai had said before was true. Him not allowing High Heaven Pavilion's people to participate in this battle was really out of consideration for them. Nanxing had only injured one of High Heaven Pavilion's young disciples, yet he had provoked such a slaughter. If High Heaven Pavilion's people really suffered heavy casualties because of this melee, then would he still be able to return to War City alive? Kang Zhan didn't dare to think about it anymore, closing his eyes in defeat, no longer paying attention to the battle. All of High Heaven Pavilion's people suddenly became excited, each of their faces flushed red as they clenched their fists. The humiliation and forbearance that he had just endured seemed to have all been found at this moment. Yang Kai had single-handedly thrown the 7 families' cultivator into chaos. Those people could only dodge and they couldn't even find the time to attack. Streaks of purple light suddenly exploded in midair, spreading out ripples visible to the naked eye. Like pebbles thrown into a calm lake, the ripples enveloped the cultivator who was dodging the lightning dragon's attacks. And within those layers of ripples, there was a crazy, destructive, and brutal divine sense attack. Divine soul skill. Yang Kai unleashed his soul skill almost without restraint. Wherever the consciousness spread out, most of the cultivators' expressions suddenly became sluggish. Their faces were filled with pain as if some evil had invaded their minds. They stood there in a daze, not knowing if they were dead or alive. The lightning dragon that followed turned them into charcoal. Only the Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters were able to slightly resist the attack of this soul skill, but they still wore a pained expression. A charred smell that made one want to vomit filled the entire area. After a while, the lightning dragon gradually disappeared into the air. The power of the mysterious grade artifact had finally been fully exerted, and Yang Kai no longer released his soul skill. In the wilderness, screams filled the air as countless people died. The seven forces originally had nearly 300 cultivators, but at this moment, only 200 remained. Corpses littered the wilderness, all of them black as charcoal. Plumes of smoke rose from these corpses, rising into the air like smoke from a kitchen chimney. At some point, Xiao Zirua had fallen to the ground, his eyes blank, his 2 rows of teeth chattering fiercely. Escaping from death, his mood was very complicated. Compared to the others, he could be said to be unscathed. When he participated in the Inheritance War, he was fearless and didn't think he would encounter any life-threatening danger. But today, he didn't dare to think so. He didn't know if it was because Yang Kai was worried about Qiu Yimeng showing mercy to him, or if it was because of his good luck that he didn't encounter the lightning dragon, but Yang Kai's slaughter this time really frightened him. Deep in his heart, a huge shadow loomed over him, as if it was grinning at him, wanting to take his life. Young Lord Qiu run. An immortal ascension boundary master from an unknown force saw Qiu Zirua lose his wits and quickly rushed to his side, helping him up and flying towards War City without looking back. Facing a man who even dared to severely injure Kang Zhan, Qiu Zirua couldn't muster up any fighting spirit. Now he just wanted to run as far away as possible. Most people thought so and quickly got up and fled, no longer caring about anything else. What are you running for? Xiangchu roared. He can't use his artifact anymore. After using that kind of attack, he should be at his weakest. We should capture him in one fell swoop. Young Lord Qiu, where is young Lord Qiu? No one paid attention to his shouts. Not to mention that Xiangchu didn't have the qualifications to issue orders. Even if he did, these people wouldn't be willing to stay in this purgatory any longer. Just as he was shouting, Xiangchu suddenly felt a sharp gaze land on him. Looking over, Xiangchu's eyes met Yang Kai's cold gaze. Feeling his heart clench, Xiangchu couldn't help retreating a few steps. Brother Xiang, let's go, we can't do anything about this. Nanxing rushed up and pulled him back. Xiangchu grit his teeth and shot a vicious and resentful glare towards Yang Kai before stomping his foot and shouting, "Let's go!" A bunch of cowards. Joining forces with such a group of people, how could he possibly achieve anything great? Xiangchu was extremely depressed, imagining that if he hadn't offended Yang Kai that day at the foot of Taifang Mountain, or if Yang Kai had accepted his goodwill, would he have been able to achieve something great by following him today? However, there was no turning back in this world. Xiangchu could only hate himself for being so blind that he had actually offended such a person. The seven forces had either fled or died, and in the blink of an eye, not a single one remained. Do you think I'll let you go? Yang Kai's voice suddenly reached everyone's ears. Although his voice wasn't loud, it was extremely clear, causing everyone to feel as if they had been plunged into an ice cellar. Nansheng and Xiangchu glanced back as they fled and saw that Yang Kai was still standing quietly in place, not chasing after them. Both of them couldn't help breathing a sigh of relief, thinking that he was just trying to scare them. Their speed became even faster. All they wanted to do was return to War City and hide in Yang Kai's compound. Once Yang Kai's anger subsided, they could ask Yang Zhao to come forward and mediate. Yang Kai's blood and qi surged, clearly showing the restlessness in his heart. Turning his eyes to the still unconscious Sassafras and the red-eyed Su Yan, he said, "Wait for half a day before you set off. By that time Sassafras should be fine." Su Yan was startled and quickly looked up. "What about you? Daring to touch my sex people, you must pay the price." After saying this sentence, Yang Kai's figure flashed like a bolt of lightning, his murderous intent filling the air. Of the seven forces, the surviving cultivator was desperately trying to escape, only gradually relaxing when they were 100 kilometers away. When they looked back and didn't see any pursuers, they couldn't help breathing a sigh of relief. Recalling what had just happened, everyone couldn't help shuddering as they rejoiced at the thought of surviving a calamity. Turning their heads and looking around, there were only 20 or so people gathered together while the rest had long since fled. "It should be fine, right?" Someone asked in horror while the others remained silent, gasping for breath. That ninth young lord simply doesn't take human lives seriously. This sentence was immediately met with agreement from everyone. And that Nansheng and Bai Chu, if it weren't for those two idiots, how could we have ended up in such a sorry state? What did you say? Suddenly, someone stood up angrily. My young Master Nan was only thinking about the overall situation. Who do you think you are? You dare insult young Master Nan? Am I wrong? Thinking about the overall situation? What a joke! Nan Sheng and Xiang Chu were clearly venting their anger on that group of people. Do you really think we don't know that your Nan family and Xiang family once suffered a loss at the hands of the ninth young lord and participated in the inheritance war this time just to get back at him? T. I'm just telling the truth. Who do you think your Xiang and Nan families are, actually daring to challenge the Yang family's young lord? Even if the second young lord really won the inheritance war, so what? What can Xiang Chu and Nanxing do to Yang Kai? At most, they can only vent their anger. Are you from the Nan family? As the two were arguing, a low voice suddenly sounded in everyone's ears. The cultivator who defended Nanxing raised his head proudly and said, "So what if I am?" But before he could finish his words, a blood-red petal suddenly pierced through his head, causing the man's eyes to bulge and his face to turn white. The moment his consciousness blurred, a figure that terrified him appeared in front of him. Ninth young lord. After seeing the face of the person who had killed the Nan family cultivator, everyone paled and quickly stood up, staring towards Yang Kai in horror. None of them had expected that Yang Kai would really catch up to them. Among these 20 or so people, only one had reached the Immortal Ascension boundary, and it was only an Immortal Ascension boundary third stage cultivator. Suddenly seeing Yang Kai appear here, the 20 or so people couldn't help moving closer to the Immortal Ascension boundary cultivator, seemingly trying to find a little sense of security. On the other hand, the Immortal Ascension boundary third stage cultivator couldn't help gulping. He was indeed an Immortal Ascension boundary master, but his combat strength wasn't high. Yang Kai could fight evenly with Lu Qingyao, so wouldn't it be easy for him to deal with him? He knew he definitely wasn't Lu Qinyao's opponent. However, what made him feel a little relieved was that after Yang Kai killed the Nan family cultivator, he didn't kill him again, instead staring at them and asking, "Who else is from the Nan family and Xiang family?" The 20 or so people looked at each other and suddenly realized what Yang Kai wanted to do. Every injustice had its perpetrator, every debt its debtor. The ninth young lord wanted to kill the Nan family and Xiang family. No one dared to answer. The more words they spoke, the more likely they were to slip up. No one knew what Yang Kai was thinking. Chapter 5:15. In the face of Yang Kai's questioning, no one dared to answer, only the sound of their hearts beating wildly. After waiting for a moment, Yang Kai lost his patience and coldly said, "If you don't speak, all of you will die. Speak and I'll spare your life." "He's from the Xiang family." Immediately, someone couldn't bear such a huge pressure and pointed to a person beside him. The man couldn't help cursing and running away. A blood-red petal flew out from the corpse of the man who had just died and pierced through the back of the fleeing man's head. With a thud, the man fell to the ground and rolled a few times on the ground before he gradually stopped moving. "Is there anyone else?" Yang Kai asked again. Everyone kept shaking their heads, indicating that there was no one from the Bai and Nan families here. Yang Kai nodded lightly and no longer asked any questions, disappearing from everyone's sight in the next moment. Seeing that he kept his promise and really let them go, the remaining cultivators gasped for breath and fell to the ground weakly. Their bodies were covered in sweat, and when the breeze blew, they felt cold all over. "Don't let me see you in War City again." From a distance, Yang Kai's voice rang out. Everyone was startled again and quickly nodded. Understood, understood. After this time, none of them dared to return to War City again. After experiencing what had just happened, none of them had the courage to continue to face this murderous Yang family young lord. If he alone could accomplish such a feat, what more with the many powerful helpers in his house? Originally, this group of people was quite optimistic about Yang Zhao, thinking that he would be able to rely on his numbers and strength to win the final victory in the inheritance war. They would also be able to follow behind Yang Zhao and drink the soup and meat. But now, no one dared to think so. A moment later, 50 kilometers away, Yang Kai once again killed 3 cultivators from the Xiang and Nen families, leaving behind a group of people who had just escaped with their lives. He wasn't the kind of person who would indiscriminately slaughter all living beings. He was a man who would be tough when he needed to be tough, and when he needed to be merciful, he would show mercy. Just like how he hadn't allowed Su Yan to kill the 4 immortal ascension boundary masters from the Qiu family and Kong family, it was also because of the complex relationship between the 8 great families. But this time, he was really annoyed by Xiang Chu and Nansheng. These two had been enemies with him since the beginning of the inheritance war. Whenever he had a dispute with them before, Yang Kai didn't care. Since they walked different paths, there was no common ground. Since they had participated in the inheritance war, their relationship was naturally antagonistic. They killed their own people and they killed their own people. It was only right and proper. But this time was different. These people were High Heaven Pavilion's last hope for revival. What's more, despite the agreement between him and Yang Zhan, Nansheng and Xiang Chu still dared to attack them. Of course, Yang Kai did not intend to go around the Xiang and Nan families. He wanted to let the world know that High Heaven Pavilion was indeed a tiger's ass that shouldn't be touched. All the people from the Xiang and Nan families were killed mercilessly. Everywhere they went, there was a trail of blood. After a day and a night, Yang Kai finally saw the figures of Xiang Chu and Nansheng in the distance. The two of them were desperately escaping with a group of people and hadn't stopped to rest all day, so at this moment, Yuan Qi couldn't help gasping for breath. They had thought they would be able to return to War City safely, so the reason they had run so fast was to prepare for the unexpected, but who knew that Yang Kai would really chase after them? When they felt the murderous intent behind them and the smell of blood, the group of people turned around in horror and suddenly panicked. "Ninth young lord is chasing after us." What? Nansheng and Xiang Chu both paled, quickly turning their heads to look back and really seeing Yang Kai's figure, like a meteor, closing the distance between them. Is he crazy? Nansheng was stunned. Just for a single High Heaven Pavilion disciple? Xiang Chu's expression was gloomy, a deep sense of powerlessness and fear flashing across his face as he nodded gently. "I'm afraid we've really touched his defiant wail." "Brother Xiang, what do we do now?" Nansheng was sweating profusely. "Hurry up and come up with an idea." "Return to War City, there's no other way. As long as we can return to Second Young Lord's house, we'll be safe." Xiang Chu grit his teeth and sped up again. Nansheng cursed under his breath, thinking to himself that the most important thing right now was to find a way to escape from Yang Kai's pursuit. After a day and night of fleeing, his group of people was almost completely exhausted. Whether or not they could outrun Yang Kai was still unknown. Inferring from Yang Kai's speed, they didn't have much hope. Where did this bastard get so much Yuan Qi to squander? After chasing him for so long, he was still full of murderous intent, full of fighting spirit, and determined not to give up. With no time to complain, Nansheng quickly stuffed a few Yuan Qi replenishing pills into his mouth and also sped up. "You can't escape." Yang Kai's voice suddenly came from behind, causing everyone's hearts to clench. "None of you from the Xiang and Nen families will survive." "Ninth young lord, we're not from the Xiang or Nen families." A young leader from one of the forces couldn't bear the pressure of Yang Kai's pursuit and quickly shouted. "Then kill the people from the Xiang and Nen families around you and I'll let you go." Xiang Chu and Nansheng's expressions changed, immediately turning vigilant towards the people around them, fearing that these people would turn on them. The people from the Xiang and Nen families added together numbered only about 70 people. First, they had been slaughtered by Yang Kai, and then they had scattered during their escape. Now, there were less than 20 people gathered around them while the people from the other forces outnumbered them by 2 to 3 times. If these people really listened to Yang Kai's words and decided to attack them, Xiang Chu and Nansheng both felt that they would be doomed. Fortunately, when these people heard Yang Kai's words, they only hesitated slightly. After all, they were on the same side as the Xiang and Nan families, so when Yang Kai suddenly said such words, they didn't dare to attack them. Seeing their hesitation, Xiang Chu hurriedly shouted, "Everyone, my Xiang and Nan families are both reputable families. If you really decide to attack us here, you should think about the consequences." Those hesitant people suddenly sobered up. If they were in a hostile relationship, no matter how they fought or killed each other, no one would say anything, but now that they were all under Yang Zhao's command, if word of this were to spread, their families would no longer be able to maintain a foothold in the future. Compared with their own lives, naturally the honor of their families was more important. What's more, whether or not Yang Kai would be able to catch up was another matter altogether. Even if he did, he would first attack the Xiang and Nan families, giving them a chance to escape. "Young Master Nan, young Master Xiang, rest assured, we will never attack you." Someone immediately said, "That would be for the best." Xiang Chu nodded slightly, feeling relieved. Behind them, Yang Kai seemed to have noticed the changes in their expressions and couldn't help coldly snorting. "Since you're not willing to tear apart face with the Xiang and Nan families, I won't force you. As long as you can stop Xiang Chu and Nan Sheng for me, I won't bother you again. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." The atmosphere that had just been harmonious and relaxed was once again warped by these words. Compared to the previous conditions, Kai Yang's conditions were much more attractive and feasible. If he only blocked Nansheng and Xiang Chu's path slightly and didn't kill them, they could accept it. Nansheng and Xiang Chu both realized that the situation was not good and quickly led their people away from the cultivator. Nansheng was even angrier and roared, "Yang Kai, do you really think you're so great? If it weren't for your identity, how could this young master allow himself to be chased by you?" Yang Kai sneered, "I've already experienced this in Taifang Mountain. Your Xiang and Nan families only know how to bully the weak. Don't you like to divide people into 3, 6, and 9 classes? Under Taifang Mountain, you were so arrogant and despotic, taking people's lives as you please, but now, facing a young lord from a super family, you only have the courage to run away?" Yang Kai's cold sarcasm rendered Nanxing speechless. At the foot of Taifang Mountain, he was really too arrogant and despotic. He bullied Kai Yang, Stormhouse and Blood Battle Gang, and even forced the Hu sisters. His face was extremely ugly. Fortunately, Tu Feng and Tang Yuxian had come to find him at that time and revealed Yang Kai's true identity, immediately silencing him and Xiang Chu. Otherwise, after that battle, Blood Battle Gang and Storm Hall would have suffered heavy casualties, and even if Yang Kai could escape, he would have had to pay a heavy price. Old and new grievances, it was time to settle. Yang Kai didn't have the patience to continue entangling with these two people he didn't put in his eyes. "Not good, 9th young lord is catching up," someone exclaimed. Many cultivators turned their heads to look and their expressions changed greatly. They found that while Yang Kai and Nanxing were talking, he had silently closed the distance between them. It was likely that he would really be able to catch up with them soon. Xiang Chu and Nansheng also panicked. Behind them, there was a surge of energy fluctuating. It seemed that Yang Kai was preparing some kind of killing move. This discovery made everyone more and more confused. The shocking blow released by the bone shield was still fresh in everyone's minds, so naturally, they were afraid he would use such a devastating attack again. Asterisk schwa schwa schwa. Asterisk the wind whistled behind them as sword chi filled the air. Tens of thousands of yuan chi sword chis lined up in rows, like a sky full of arrows, fiercely flying towards them. This overwhelming and indiscriminate attack immediately hindered everyone's escape. These cultivators were forced to turn around and use their martial skills and artifacts to resist the oncoming sword chi. After some resistance, a few more cultivators with inferior strength fell to the ground. Xiang Chu's expression became gloomy to the extreme, realizing that if they continued to flee like this, they wouldn't be able to escape Yang Kai's pursuit. Yang Kai's speed was much faster than his own. "Elders, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to stop him for a while." His expression suddenly becoming firm, Xiang Chu turned to the several Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters around him and said, "These people were the only remaining Immortal Ascension Boundary Masters from the Xiang and Nan families. the strongest among them only at the Immortal Ascension Boundary 4th stage. However, there were quite a few of them, 7 in total. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.